Welcome back. US Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel is stepping down after less than 2 years on the job. President Barack Obama made the announcement Monday with Hagel by his side.
Yeah, sources tell CNN Hagel was forced out, but the White House says both men agreed that a change was needed. Senior White House correspondent Jim Acosta joining us now from Washington. What they say publicly is, of course, not what goes on behind the scenes often, as you know only too well, Jim. So why now, and what's the impact going to be?
Well, Michael and Lynda, the president, as you heard earlier today, said that this was Chuck Hagel's decision, but the White House has all but acknowledged today that this was not all Hagel's doing. Press Secretary Josh Earnest said this all started about a month ago when the president and Hagel started having conversations about the direction Mr. Obama wanted to take the Pentagon, and they both realized it was time for a change. But White House officials have made it no secret that they have had problems with Hagel's message discipline, starting with his rocky confirmation hearings only a year and 9 months ago, when he mishandled a whole slew of questions on some very important policy subjects like Iran and so forth. And then there was this Hagel assessment of ISIS that we heard last summer, that the group was, quote, way beyond anything the U.S. had seen. That was after the president had described ISIS and other related terror groups as the JV team for al-Qaeda. So they weren't on the same page there. And then there was Hagel's critique of the president's Syria policy in the form of a memo to Susan Rice, the National Security Advisor, just in the last few weeks. So it was clear that he was not on board with the president's policies and had to go. But White House officials insist the president took a lot of pride in the fact that Hagel was the first enlisted combat veteran to serve as defense secretary, and both Mr. Obama and the vice president developed a kinship with Hagel in the Senate when the Nebraska Republican was very critical of the Iraq war surge under George W. Bush. Now, as to who might replace Hagel, we are hearing about 3 names right now from senior administration officials, former top Pentagon officials, Michelle Flournoy and Ashton Carter. Those are 2 names being named right now. And also Senator Jack Reed from Rhode Island. He's also a combat veteran. But Reed's office has already said today publicly that he does not want the job. So that was quickly pushed to the side. But I would say at this point, Michael and Lynda, sort of keep your eye on Michelle Flournoy right now. She was also a critic of the Iraq war, so sort of has that in common with the president. And she worked on President Obama's transition team way back in 2008. So she has a long history with this White House, and there likely would not be as much daylight between her and the president if she becomes, and she would become, the nation's first female defense secretary if she gets the nod.
And Jim, given the differences of opinion that you talked about with Hagel and President Obama, what sort of changes, what shift will we see in foreign policy going forward?
Well, you know, we're already starting to see some of those shifts take place. Over the weekend, the administration made it clear, they confirmed to CNN and other news outlets, that the president is tailoring the mission somewhat in Afghanistan. That combat troops, according to a presidential order late last week, will be able to engage in combat to protect themselves and to engage in counterterrorism operations. Remember, the president had said the combat mission in Afghanistan is ending at the end of 2014. And so that was a slight tweak to the policy there in Afghanistan. And then also keep in mind what is happening with ISIS. The president said repeatedly throughout the year that he would not put U.S. combat troops on the ground in Iraq. And then during the G20 summit in Australia, I asked the president about this because the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Martin Dempsey, suggested, well, maybe there's some wiggle room there. And the president said, you know what, there may be scenarios where he may have to put ground troops in Iraq. And so there are things that are changing here, and I think what the White House would like to see at this point is somebody who has message discipline. So if they are changing strategy, it's clearly communicated, and they don't have the defense secretary on one side of the page and the president and everybody else on the other side. That has been a problem during Chuck Hagel's tenure.
All right, Jim, thanks for that. Great analysis as always. Jim Acosta at the White House.